Welcome to the third video of this series where we are taking a look at the Ofgem price cap. In part 2, we looked at the price cap hitting the headlines and some of the myths. In this part 3 video, we look at who this mysterious typical customer is, why their headline rate isn't relevant to us, and why regional prices exist within the cap. As I said in the previous video, I'm not a big fan of the way in which the price cap is announced to the general public. The headline rate, as I like to call it, so that £1,690 value just announced for April, means very little to every single household. That said, it is useful to generalise the traveller's direction of where things are going. So clearly this upcoming cap is cheaper than the last one, so my bills should reduce for the next year, and that's great. But if I look at my personal circumstances against this typical customer, yes, I do use both gas and electricity, but not those consumption values. I use more kilowatt hours per year on both fuels, so I'll be paying more than the 1,690 for sure. I do have standard credit single rate meters and I do pay by direct debit, so I am typical there, but many won't be. But I don't live in GB average. Actually, if I check the regional rates that apply to me, which we'll look at in a bit more detail later, my regional rates are actually slightly lower for the standing charge elements and also the gas unit rate, but I pay more for the electricity on the unit rate. The headline rate for my region is around £30 lower than the £1,690 announced, but my actual usage will see me spend in excess of £2,000. So what is being capped if I spend more than £1,690, as Ofgem have told me is the price cap? Well, it's the actual standing charge and unit rate, and we'll explain how that is as we get through this session. So what is the price cap and why was it introduced? Put simply, it's a protection measure introduced by the regulator Ofgem. It saw that plenty of new supply entrants added competition, but also risk to the market. There were plenty of customers on standard variable tariffs or SVTs that were following the market or put on default tariffs which essentially do the same thing. With energy markets being typically volatile, and we've recently seen just how volatile they can be, there was no protection for customers being detrimented by high prices pushing their tariffs upwards, or worse, prices falling and suppliers not passing through those reduced rates. With over half the market believed to be subject to these tariffs, Ofgem introduced the price cap. It's a methodology to ensure suppliers do not charge more than a prescribed unit rate to customers on these variable tariffs. It should encourage people to look for fixed tariffs if they're suitable, or else sit in comfort that they'll always now pay a fair price, that being market reflective if they choose not to fix. Since its inception in 2019, you can see from this graph that the rates were initially stable, holding just above the £1,000 mark, but events of 2021 and 2022 have pushed those to eye-watering levels. In April 2022, it increased to £1,971, then on to £3,529 in October, closely followed by that peak of £4,279 in January 2023. It then started falling to £3,280 in April before getting back to £2,074 in July. It's worth noting the government EPG support, which is highlighted in red, meaning customers were only subject to an actual price cap of £2,500 and not the numbers I just mentioned, with the government picking up the tab for that red area. I don't think people really appreciate just how big an impact that support package was, but we'll touch on it again a little later. Now, the last few cap rates have fallen further, with October last year being 1,384, a slight increase in January to 1,928, and then most recently the upcoming April cap at 1,690. Now, I refer to these annual rates as the headline rate. They're not what anyone will actually pay because no one's that typical customer living in GB average, as we've just discussed. But depending on your location in the UK, how much energy you actually use, and that's gas and electricity independently, and how you pay your bill will decide how much you actually pay for your energy. So let's ignore the headline rate. It's only really useful to tell us the direction of travel at each cap announcement. It's either going up or it's going down compared to the last period. What we do need to focus our attention on is the specific standing charge and unit rate for our region. Now, if I sit in leafy Surrey in my mansion with a heated indoor pool, of course I'm dreaming here, I enjoy a different set of rates to that of my one-bedroom flat in Scotland. I'll also have vastly different bills because of the difference in energy consumption, so neither of these properties will pay the headline rate because neither are the typical customer. Understanding how much energy you use has become a key focal point. Many have adopted smart meters to help watch usage in real time and adapt their usage behaviour to help manage costs. But why does my mansion in Surrey have a different unit rate to my flat in Scotland? Well, this comes down to the regional network costs. The UK is split into several zones for gas and electricity, and as you can imagine, each is vastly different to another. Some are very rural and a small number of people, while others are hugely populated with intricate and complex requirements to get energy from source to consumption point. For gas specifically, much of the import points are on the far north and east of the country, so the majority of it needs to be transported to the rest of the country. Electricity generation isn't the same with a more regional spread, but it does have its own intricacies of transportation issues. So that attracts different costs to install, maintain and repair, and that is the main driver of why there is regional pricing. Could we not just all pay one price? Well, that would mean subsidising one area with another, and these are now privately owned companies, much like all of the suppliers. But before we assume private companies means unlimited profits, they're not allowed. They have regulated price controls to limit the profits they can make and must ensure suitable investment into their networks. They do have indexed formulas to help set some of the prices, so efficient maintenance is the key driver for them. For reference, the cheapest area for gas is the East Midlands and the most expensive being the South West. For electricity, the cheapest is London and the most expensive is North Wales and Mersey. Now that's based on the unit rate plus the standing charge rather than just the unit rate alone, which gives different regions if you look at the graphs. Another point to note here is that levelising the regions, much like we've done in the latest price cap with payment type, comes at a cost. To move money from one region to another would mean reconciliations, which require resource, in other words, cost. We would need to properly look at all the overall pros and cons of doing this. So that brings us to the end of part 3. Join us in part 4, where we look at the energy suppliers coming and going over the years and what makes up the price cap itself. See you shortly.